Hello, loves. I want to introduce you to Liz Bokt. Liz is the owner of Shop Intaglio, a printing and engraving company, and she's a six-figure maker selling on Etsy, Amazon, and her own website. And she's here today to share with you her experience on what it's like to work with me inside of the Maker's Method. Welcome, Liz. I'm so excited that you are here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Real quick, so Liz is actually a landscape photographer, and I love her, story and background and her experience. I actually go to you quite often when I have questions and want to bounce ideas off of you and that kind of stuff. So tell me a little bit, take us back to like the beginning, because you've been with me since I started back in 2019 with this business. So take us back to kind of that time, like transitioning, being a photographer. Your story's so great because you are a photographer, you have a lot of experience in photography, but you struggled to specifically take product photos. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I've been a landscape photographer maybe 20 years at this point. And that is one of the things that I do on a regular basis as part of my career. And when I met you, I was immediately drawn to what you were doing because I've had an Etsy shop since 2006. And one of the biggest things that I have always struggled with is taking product shots, because the photography that I do uses all natural light. Like if the sun gives it to us, great. And if it's not there, you don't have it. And I bring studio lights in and I kind of look at them and go, I don't know what I'm doing here. And there's no props in the photography that I do. And just it's a completely different universe. So even though I know how to use a camera, transitioning to a studio setting, it's just a completely different way of thinking. So I needed help.
And so two things I want to point out there, like key components here. So one, and we're not talking like she's not like, hobbyist, amateur, like she sells her photos, you get featured in all kinds of publications, like she travels and shoots landscape photography. So we're not talking about a small scale here. And I think the important thing here, especially for makers to understand, is makers will take their questions to Google, to Pinterest, to YouTube, and ask like how to take better product photos, or how to light product photos. And the thing is like there are, what are there, like, I don't know, 28 plus genres of photography, and they all potentially require different lighting techniques or different techniques in general. And so even if you go and you search and you have a photographer out there that says does portrait photography or landscape photography, and they're out there educating people on how to use their camera, how to take photos, how to set up their light, that kind of stuff, if it's not specific to the work you're doing, it may not be accurate for you. Doesn't mean that it's wrong, right? Like there's a lot of different ways we can light things, there's a lot of different techniques that can be used, but it's important to understand that specific to makers, specific to product photography, you need solutions specific to what you are doing. And I think that, and I don't know, I want to ask you, like, what, before you found me, how were you trying to solve those light issues? And because you go from, like you said, the sun, when you're doing landscape photography, you are capturing the way that light falls, right? And it brings out this beauty, excuse me. But when you're a product photographer and you have to shoot your photo, it's like you have to create the light. It's like opposite, right? Like the light's being created for you in landscape and you are seeing it and capturing it, whereas we have to almost create that.
I think my biggest problem is I was just overcomplicating everything
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't entirely sure what I needed to do. So I had sets that were bigger than they needed to be, and I had more lights than maybe I needed to have. And everything was just more complicated because I wasn't entirely sure what I needed to do. So you introduced me to the light box that we built.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so rock simple that I could just put a product in the box, turn the lights on, take a picture, and 5 minutes later I was done. And I remember the first day that we set that up, I was just like in disbelief, going, this is so simple. I shot my entire product line that I had going out that day in 45 minutes. And
That's
that would have taken
awesome.
me the entire day because
Yeah.
I was just trying to do too many things that I didn't need to do.
Well, so let me ask you quick, with landscape photography, what is like really the core of what you learn? Like, what is one of the most important aspects of lens? Is it lenses because you're doing a lot of telephoto type stuff, or
It's composition,
okay,
um, and knowing where you want to capture. So I'll go to a spot and wait for the sun to hit in the right spot and know which lens will capture it in that way.
okay,
So I'll have like 5 lenses with me. I want to know which one suits, if I want to go super close up or super far away, depth of field, stuff like that. And then just kind of camp out there and wait for everything to just align the perfect way.
and I find that interesting because do you feel like prior to kind of, coming into the maker's method that you really took the time to fully understand light? Because you were more so just like you said, you're sitting there waiting for the light to just hit that, whether it's a mountain or whatever, you're waiting for the light to hit perfectly. But
Right.
you can't modify that light at that point when you're on shooting on such a large scale. So is that like just an area that you never necessarily took time to kind of like learn just because you didn't have to essentially
I
for that type of work?
absolutely, I
Yeah.
never learned that because I started with a camera outdoors
Mm-hmm.
and only learned with the camera outdoors. I never learned studio photography in any capacity whatsoever. So moving indoors was a completely foreign concept to me.
And just even shooting because you'd shoot with natural light as well indoors, especially
Yes.
your plants. She has a lot of she's our plant lady in our group, and we go to her with our plant questions too. But she has so many plants and they thrive so well, and you shoot your plants a lot as well.
And only with natural light.
Yeah. So it's just it's an interesting concept, and this is one of those things to you don't realize all the components that fall into place with you coming from an expert landscape photographer, like you understand how a DSLR camera works. You now let me ask you real quick because you've got all the fancy stuff. What are you typically shooting with when it comes to product photos?
My phone.
Your iPhone.
Yes.
Yeah. Which I love too, because I think a lot of times professional photographers have a hard time separating that. Of course they it's like at the end of the day, that your camera is going to do amazing things, like your DSLR camera is going to do amazing things, but specific to shooting digital online for an online shop, it's just not necessary. And
Right.
yeah, so tell us a little about that.
Um, I
Was that
mean,
a transition?
My DSLR is like 48 megapixels or something ridiculous like that. It's giant, and it's just
Mhm.
it's necessary for what I do with it, but for putting a product shot up on my store, I literally don't need a billboard.
Mhm.
So my phone does a great job. I mean,
Mhm.
I have an iPhone 13, I think, and it has an amazing camera in it. So I don't need anything beyond that. It works great. And my entire computer system is all Mac. So for
Mhm.
me, being able to just shoot the pictures and then open up the photo app and they're right there, and I don't have to do anything. I don't have to sit there and like import pictures and
Mhm.
process them. That is a huge time saver.
Now, do you use Photoshop for your product photos, or are you not even
I use Photoshop,
maybe
yes.
you still use Photoshop? But with the light box, your editing is pretty. Pretty minimal.
It's extremely minimal, and I actually made macros for the light box. So
Mm-hmm.
I learned like how my phone tends to take the images and like they veer in one particular way.
Mm-hmm.
So I made an automatic process. So I open the picture up in Photoshop and press a button, and it does like 5 steps, and ta-da, perfect picture.
That's awesome.
Because almost any picture you take needs a little bit of editing to brighten it
Mhm.
up and do a little bit of stuff to it to be perfect. And so I just took it one tiny step further and made it automatic. Um, but it's not a lot of editing. It's pretty much out of the box.
The beast. The beast of the
Yes.
box. We joke and call it the beast because it's a big box. It's a big box. Um Now you get kind of, so list sells a lot of different items. Big and small, like you're shooting in the box sometimes, you're shooting with natural light sometimes. Um you also get kind of creative when it comes to your backdrops, which is what I like, because I can scroll through Instagram and I instantly will know that a photo is hers because of that. Can you tell us a little bit about just kind of your process when it comes to creating your photos that are branded to, your business specifically?
So a core part of a lot of my products is I also am a painter. So I paint things, digitize them, and then I print them on to things like mouse pads or badge reels, just different products, coffee mugs, stuff like that. So to kind of stay in line with that branding, I will often take photographs of things on a painted backdrop.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's not the same backdrop, but they go well
Same
together.
design, yeah, they complement.
Yeah. And I also should make a lot of things out of wood and leather, and I will shoot those on painted backdrops as well to stay very cohesive in the branding.
Which I
And,
love.
I keep it very colorful. We're a big rainbow party over here.
Mm-hmm.
It's very bright, very happy all the time.
And that's like you've brought up, so there's a lot of elements that you deal with. So not only are you transferring and creating digital, like what do you call them? Like when you take your painting and you make it just a digital form, is that called something specific?
I think it's just called digitizing.
Okay, so just digitizing the actual work. So you're doing that, which has somewhat of a, component. We're creating digital files with that. I've been actually getting a lot of questions lately about makers who, they create like digital designs, like say in not Photoshop, in what's the design one?
Procreate,
Adobe, well, Procreate, or what's Adobe's?
Illustrator.
Illustrator, thank you. Why was slipping my mind. But they create these digital files and they then want to download them and upload like that as the image for the listing photo. Um, and again, it kind of just goes back to understanding like this big difference. And this is one of the points I want to talk about because you have such experience with it. It's just that difference in, we're shooting photos for the online space, right? Versus shooting photos for print, or, for billboards, or what you had mentioned before. And it's a big disconnect, I think, with makers when they go out and they search, they search Google, they search, YouTube for answers. It's important to understand that there are different techniques and different, basically what's the end game goal there, right? And so how was that for you, being so used to, and maybe you didn't experience this, but being so used to being a photographer that, it needs tons of pixels and is, calibrating, screens for have proper color when you go to print and all that kind of stuff, to really taking it down to that basic level of just creating, digital images for your online shop.
There was definitely a transition, and I had to kind of understand I think what the function of the images were, because
Mm-hmm.
they were
I
just
like
not a
that
function
function.
I had ever worked with before. And the big revelation for me was that you helped me kind of grasp that the pictures didn't need to be like the most creative thing that I did today. The product was the creative thing that I did today. And like there's definitely creativity that goes into the product shot,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not the zenith of what I did necessarily. Because sometimes the product shot needs to be, a coffee mug on a white backdrop.
Yeah. Very basic.
Because that's an important function that we need to
Yeah.
get done. Um, and getting it where it needs to be that coffee mug on a white backdrop, 2000 pixels. I don't need to shoot for the moon here, but that is
Mm-hmm.
actually a really important image that I need to do, and that will help me sell more coffee mugs. And that's just not something that I'd ever done before. And it took a little bit for me to get past the idea that maybe it was just a very different thing than all the other images I'd ever shot. I'm totally cool with it now.
Yeah.
But it was just so different. I think it was because I was always used to holding a camera and it being one certain type of activity. And it had never served another activity for me before.
That's a interesting perspective. And I guess people can relate to that, even just in the sense of, if we're trying to capture our kids or we're trying to capture, just like a family photo, again, we're so used to just, picking up that smartphone, holding it a certain way. That's like a big thing, right? Like we
Right.
are on these devices like this all day long. And you go from that step of just, the second nature of shooting and what you're doing where, we can't just pick up our smartphone and just shoot an image. Like we have to create with intention, and sometimes we have to shoot images that we are in love with. Like we're gonna be hard pressed to find really any maker who just loves that studio shot on white, right? Like,
I've met a couple, and I'm very impressed with them. But those just don't drive me, but I
yeah.
am driven by the idea of the images connecting with people and people
Mhm.
liking my products and people liking my store and things like that. So it's like a stepping stone on that creative process, even if the image itself inherently isn't something that makes my heart sing.
Yeah. Okay. If anybody is on the fence when it comes to one, I mean, we know that learning to take your own ultimately at the end of the day is going to, it comes down to that value of time and money. But we always have to have photos of our products, right? We're always creating new products. We always need stuff for social. So learning to take your own product photos is essentially an investment that will pay you over and over and over again. One of the
Absolutely.
most important skills. So if someone is on the fence today, even, looking at the fact that you came into this as a photographer, right? I mean, you almost had a different challenge because you had to almost scale back your knowledge because taking product photos can be simple, right? Like it almost to a point where you said you were overcomplicating it. And I wonder if that's because of just the skill level you had. Like, would you agree with that?
I would. And I think I've seen several people come in who say, they're not sure what's wrong with their pictures or their store and they're not selling, but they know how to take pictures. So they don't think that's a problem. But then I look at their store and I'm like, no, I think the pictures are your problem because you're treating your product shots as a photograph in and of itself, and you're not treating it as a product shot. And that's just a different skill that you need to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a photography skill that comes with every other photography skill because, as you said, there's so many different types of photography. And it is good to look at it as a separate skill set and learn how to do product shots.
And on to add to that, like when we look at learning to take our own product photos, it isn't just the technical side of like getting that high quality image. we're looking at incorporating branding. We're looking at incorporating your ideal customer. Like you have to, every background setting you choose, your props, they have to connect with that person as they scroll through search or scroll through social. And that's one thing that, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I put a high focus on that visual marketing and sales, because you can't necessarily be successful in selling more products unless you know how to communicate the value, right?
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things that I've learned with you is the composition and styling of the product shot and how to make it something that communicates to the customer, because that's definitely one of my weakest points, because it's not something that I've ever had to deal with before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something I think about a lot inherently. And I've gone to you many times with a first draft of an image and said,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's working here. And you give me a bunch of thoughts and I look at it and go, yeah, okay, I understand now. This change out the props and change out the colors a little bit, or fix the lighting or something, and come back with images that are significantly stronger and able to communicate to people better, and then put those up as the images. And those are products that sell now.
That's awesome. And sometimes it is just like just this tiniest detail. Is it like that with landscape? Because I've never done landscape. Like, do tiny little details matter?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Sometimes it's the difference between 15 minutes,
mm-hmm. And the way the light hits and that kind of stuff. But yeah, like, I mean, you could just slightly alter placement of something, or like you said, swap out like a color or add some kind of, I mean, they're just little tiny things that, you just tweak and can make like a world difference when it comes to, how we're communicating and composing those images. Okay, so if they're on the fence, what's your biggest suggestion?
My suggestion is to acknowledge that product photography is way different than any other type, and that they should take a critical look at their store and consider if they are truly communicating to their customers, because I think they probably aren't.
Yeah.
I scroll through Etsy and I think most of us aren't doing the best job at it.
I know it's hard. Like, and until you get to, Etsy removes so many barriers when it comes to starting your own shop, that I think sometimes it's almost like we skip a critical part of really understanding the principles behind running a business and what we are supposed to be doing. And that's a big one when you look at communication in general, and we've got verbal and nonverbal, and you write product descriptions, you create posts for social, and really product photography, all that is taking that communication and putting it in a visual way where we can express kind of the same messaging. And when you start to learn how intentional and how like attention grabbing and converting that can be to actually communicate, the features and benefits of your product and all of that in your visuals, it really does help to increase your sales.
It absolutely does.
Well, thank you so much, Liz, for joining us and sharing your experience of working with me inside of the Maker's Method. I adore you, love you, appreciate you.
Thank you.
You have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.